The war in Ukraine grinds on. It has been more than 2 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion. The conflict has become a war of attrition. Both sides are locked in a bitter struggle for territory in the east and south. Russia has made incremental gains, but at a heavy cost. Ukraine has mounted a fierce defense, bolstered by Western weapons and intelligence. The conflict has had a devastating impact on Ukraine. Cities and towns have been reduced to rubble. Millions of people have been displaced from their homes. The war has also sent shockwaves through the global economy. It has led to soaring energy prices and food shortages. Despite the ongoing fighting, there have been some glimmers of hope. Prisoner exchanges have taken place. Negotiations between Russia and Ukraine have resumed, albeit with little progress. However, the path to peace remains elusive. The war in Ukraine is a tragedy for all involved. It is a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. The international community must continue to support Ukraine. It must also work to hold Russia accountable for its actions. Peace in Ukraine is essential, not only for the Ukrainian people, but for the stability of Europe and the world. The war has entered a new phase. The initial Russian offensive, aimed at capturing Kyiv and toppling the Ukrainian government, failed. Russia has since shifted its focus to the east and south. It is seeking to consolidate its control over the Donbas region. Ukraine, for its part, is determined to liberate its occupied territories. It has launched counteroffensives in recent months, retaken some lost ground. However, the fighting is expected to continue for the foreseeable future. The war in Ukraine began with a multi-pronged Russian offensive. Russian troops poured across the border into northern, eastern, and southern Ukraine. The initial target was Kyiv, the capital city. Russian forces advanced rapidly towards Kyiv, but were met with fierce Ukrainian resistance. The Battle of Kyiv was a turning point in the war. Ukrainian forces, bolstered by Western weapons and intelligence, inflicted heavy losses on the Russian military. Russia was forced to withdraw from northern Ukraine in disarray. Following its defeat in the north, Russia shifted its focus to the east and south. It launched a major offensive in the Donbas region, which is home to a large Russian-speaking population. Russia has made slow but steady gains in the Donbas. However, Ukraine has continued to put up stiff resistance. In recent months, Russia has also stepped up its attacks on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. Russian missiles and drones have targeted power plants, water treatment facilities, and other critical infrastructure. These attacks have caused widespread blackouts and shortages. The fighting in Ukraine has been characterized by its brutality. Both sides have been accused of war crimes. The United Nations estimates that tens of thousands of civilians have been killed. Millions more have been displaced from their homes. The war in Ukraine is a humanitarian catastrophe. It is also a major geopolitical crisis. The conflict has strained relations between Russia and the West to the breaking point. It has also raised fears of a wider conflict between NATO and Russia. In a bid to break the stalemate and potentially pave a path towards peace negotiations, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky recently put forward a controversial proposal. He suggested a territorial exchange, offering to cede areas of eastern Ukraine currently under Russian control in return for territories Russia occupies elsewhere. This proposal, while surprising to many, reflects the difficult realities Ukraine faces. The war has taken a heavy toll on the country, both in terms of human life and economic stability. Zelensky's offer, while undoubtedly painful, could be seen as a pragmatic approach to securing an end to the bloodshed. However, the Kremlin's response was swift and unambiguous. Rejection. Russian President Vladimir Putin, through his spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, dismissed the proposal outright. They reiterated Russia's stance that any negotiations must recognize the new territorial reality, a thinly veiled reference to Russia's illegal annexation of Ukrainian territories. This exchange underscores the deep chasm that separates the two sides. While Zelensky's proposal signaled a willingness to explore even deeply unpopular options for peace, Putin's rejection reinforces the view that Russia remains committed to its maximalist goals, even if it means prolonging the war indefinitely. The international community has reacted cautiously to Zelensky's proposal. Some see it as a potential breakthrough, a sign that Ukraine is willing to make difficult concessions for peace. Others, however, fear that such a move could embolden Russia, potentially encouraging further territorial ambitions. Adding another layer of complexity to the already volatile situation is the re-emergence of former US President Donald Trump on the international stage. Having returned to power after a tumultuous 4 years, Trump has wasted no time in inserting himself into the Ukraine conflict, announcing his intention to broker a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. This move has been met with a mixture of apprehension and skepticism. Critics point to Trump's history of cozying up to authoritarian leaders, particularly Putin, and question his ability to act as an honest broker. They argue that Trump, far from seeking a just and lasting peace, is more interested in securing a foreign policy victory, even if it comes at the expense of Ukrainian sovereignty. Trump's approach, as outlined in various public statements, appears to prioritize a swift end to the conflict over addressing the root causes of the war. He has hinted at pressuring Ukraine to accept territorial concessions, a move that has alarmed Ukrainian officials and their allies in Europe. Furthermore, Trump's willingness to circumvent European allies and engage in direct negotiations with Putin has raised concerns about potential side deals that could undermine NATO unity and weaken the Western response to Russian aggression. Trump's peace initiative, while presented with his usual bravado, remains shrouded in ambiguity. Details about his proposed plan are scarce, and it remains unclear what, if any, leverage he possesses to bring both sides to the negotiating table. Section 5. America First Again? Trump's potential bargaining chips. As Trump wades back into the turbulent waters of international diplomacy, speculation abounds regarding his potential strategy and the leverage he might employ to force a resolution to the Russia-Ukraine war. Analysts, drawing upon Trump's past actions and pronouncements, have identified a number of potential bargaining chips he could bring to the table. One significant lever is U.S. military aid to Ukraine. Trump has repeatedly questioned the wisdom of providing billions of dollars in weapons and equipment to Kyiv, often framing it as an unnecessary drain on American resources. He could threaten to reduce or even cut off this aid entirely, using it as a cudgel to force concessions from Zelensky. Another potential bargaining chip lies in NATO expansion. Trump has long been critical of NATO, viewing it as outdated and financially burdensome for the United States. He could offer to curtail or even halt further NATO expansion, particularly into Eastern Europe, as a concession to Putin. Beyond these concrete measures, Trump might also resort to more unorthodox methods. He could, for instance, offer Putin sanctions relief, a move that would be deeply unpopular with many in Congress but could be appealing to the Russian leader, who is facing mounting economic pressure. Trump's potential bargaining chips, while seemingly powerful, come with significant risks. Curtailing military aid to Ukraine, for instance, would likely embolden Russia and weaken Ukraine's ability to defend itself. Similarly, offering concessions on NATO expansion could undermine the alliance's credibility and embolden Putin's expansionist ambitions. Section 6. The price of war: casualties, displacement, and a crumbling world order. The war in Ukraine has exacted a horrific toll on all parties involved. While the true extent of the devastation may not be fully comprehended for years to come, the available data paints a grim picture of death, displacement, and a world order teetering on the brink. Casualty figures, though often contested and difficult to verify amidst the fog of war, point to a staggering loss of life. Tens of thousands of soldiers on both sides have perished in the fighting, with many more suffering life-altering injuries. The civilian toll, while harder to quantify, is undoubtedly immense. Beyond the immediate casualties, the war has triggered a massive humanitarian crisis. Millions of Ukrainians have been internally displaced, forced to flee their homes in search of safety. Neighboring countries, particularly Poland, have borne the brunt of this exodus, straining resources and testing the limits of humanitarian aid. The war's impact extends far beyond the battlefield. The global economy, already reeling from the COVID-19 pandemic, has been further destabilized by the conflict. Sanctions imposed on Russia have disrupted supply chains, leading to soaring energy prices and exacerbating food insecurity in many parts of the world. The war in Ukraine has exposed the fragility of the post-Cold War order. The rules-based international system, already under strain from rising nationalism and geopolitical competition, has been severely tested by Russia's blatant aggression. Section 7. Beyond the battlefield: prisoner exchanges and the human toll. Amidst the relentless violence and geopolitical maneuvering, glimmers of humanity occasionally pierce the darkness. Prisoner exchanges, while often fraught with political calculations, offer rare moments of hope and a poignant reminder of the human cost of this conflict. One such exchange occurred recently, involving the release of Mark Fogel, an American teacher detained in Russia on drug charges. Fogel, whose case had garnered significant media attention, was freed in exchange for Alexander Vinnik, a Russian national accused of cybercrimes by the United States. These exchanges, while providing a degree of solace to the families of those released, underscore the deeply personal toll of this war. Behind the statistics and strategic objectives lie individual lives shattered by the conflict. The plight of prisoners of war remains a significant concern. Reports of mistreatment and torture have emerged from both sides, raising alarm bells among human rights organizations. The International Committee of the Red Cross, tasked with monitoring the treatment of POWs, has faced significant obstacles in accessing detention facilities. Prisoner exchanges, while offering a glimmer of hope, represent a mere drop in the ocean of suffering. The vast majority of those impacted by the war remain trapped in a cycle of violence and uncertainty, their lives on hold as the conflict grinds on. Section 8. From Annexation to Invasion: A Timeline of Russian Aggression. The current war in Ukraine, while shocking in its brutality, did not erupt in a vacuum. It is the culmination of years of escalating Russian aggression, a slow-burning crisis that the international community failed to adequately address. The seeds of the conflict were sown in 2014 when Russia, under the guise of protecting Russian speakers, invaded and annexed the Crimean Peninsula, a Ukrainian territory with a majority Russian population. This blatant violation of international law was met with condemnation from the West, but concrete action was limited. Emboldened by the lack of a robust response, Russia then fomented a separatist movement in eastern Ukraine, providing arms, training, and logistical support to pro-Russian rebels in the Donbas region. A bloody conflict ensued, claiming thousands of lives and displacing millions. Despite multiple ceasefires and diplomatic efforts, the situation in eastern Ukraine remained a simmering conflict for years. Russia, meanwhile, continued to build up its military presence along the Ukrainian border, its intention becoming increasingly clear. The world watched in horror as Russia, on February 24, 2022, launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This unprovoked act of aggression shattered the illusion of peace in Europe and plunged the world into a new era of uncertainty and geopolitical instability. Section 9. The Fog of War: Uncertainty and the Long Road Ahead. As the war in Ukraine enters its third year, the path ahead remains shrouded in uncertainty. The battlefield situation is fluid, with both sides seemingly locked in a war of attrition. Negotiations, while having taken place sporadically, have yielded little tangible progress. Russia, despite suffering heavy losses and facing staunch Ukrainian resistance, shows no signs of abandoning its maximalist goals. Putin, seemingly undeterred by sanctions and international condemnation, appears determined to pursue a military victory, even if it means prolonging the conflict indefinitely. Ukraine, for its part, remains defiant, boasted by Western support and the unwavering determination of its people. Kyiv has vowed to continue fighting for its survival as a sovereign nation. However, the human and economic costs of this resistance are mounting. The international community faces a daunting challenge: balancing the need to support Ukraine while avoiding escalation with Russia is a delicate balancing act with potentially catastrophic consequences. The specter of nuclear war, once unthinkable, now looms large in the background. The war in Ukraine is a tragedy for all involved. It is a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the fragility of peace. As the world grapples with the fallout of this war, one can only hope that a just and lasting peace can be achieved, however distant it may seem.